what's the best thing you can do at this point in your life? It for a kid who's only really doing school, it is not to try to screw up school. It's to try to do school great. For every Bill Gates who dropped out of school, or Zuckerberg or whatever, like for every one of them, there are millions of people that should have stayed in school and would have had better outcomes had they stayed in school. And the answer is like to the question is which is more important, street smarts or school smarts? I mean, you have it. You ideally you would like both. Now, can you get school smarts from places other than school? You can now. You probably couldn't when we were growing up. Maybe you
That's
can
right.
now because the information's out there.
Yeah, now you could learn from, hey, I want to learn sales training. I'll go to Grant Cardone, you go to Alex Hormoz, you go to whoever. You could just go learn from people who are either billionaires or 100 millionaires and get their information from them directly. You definitely could not do that 40 years ago.
You couldn't. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's almost like for our parents' generation, or maybe our grandparents' generation, the pensions were so great, entrepreneurship was so difficult at that point. There was so little information out there that maybe the best move the best move was working for somebody else. Now, for sure, the best move is working for yourself. It's not even close. Like if you don't own it or own part of it, then you don't have much control over it.
What do you think about people who do like a route like a CEO of Weight Watchers? I think her signing bonus was like $15 million, and then salaries like 8 million.
C-suite, especially like career C-suite corporate types, have agents the same way like baseball players or musicians do, and really like the entire negotiation is trying to find a way where they get paid even if they do a bad job, which is like the same thing that happens with athletes and coaches. And I don't know enough about big companies. I've not worked in a big company. I've dealt with a lot of big companies. It's scary what happens, right? Like it's scary what happens because in these big like matrix organizations, there's so many different competing interests, and it's definitely not pure, and there's so much politics, and the incentives are
A lot of
so
politics.
messed up that I can't even imagine to be at the top of that, how hard that is. So if you can do that and make that battleship go forward, you should probably be paid a lot of money. I mean, that makes sense to me. I just
Oh, for sure. Hey, I'm not debating the salaries. In terms of financial gain, there is a route in the sort of corporate ladder, or you know, AJ Patel, he sold Zesty Paws or whatever, and I think he had mentioned that a lot of the things he hired at the very beginning, the company's like zero, and he's poaching from these massive companies, head of sales, head of marketing, whatever, starting with a very high salary plus an equity. For that person that gets that deal, like that's probably the best bet as opposed to starting something from zero. I mean,
Okay, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
all I don't
Yeah,
know.
that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we say all the time, we have a couple dozen people, I think now in Carbon 6 that haven't worked for anybody, haven't had a job until Carbon 6 in a very long time. One of
Hmm.
the things we tried to make sure was we kept all the founders. We weren't Amazon sellers, as I said earlier, and we wanted to make sure that all of our product decisions were guided by Amazon sellers for obvious reasons, since we serve Amazon sellers. And so we tried to find structures and creative ways to keep everybody involved, and not just like in a nominal way, but really actively. Lee and Robert from Seller Investigators, they're both 50-year-old men who haven't worked for anybody, I think ever, maybe ever, but not since they were
Wow.
teenagers. Our core principle is we all own Carbon 6, and we're really trying to create this environment where everyone feels like they are completely empowered to make decisions and just go for it, and aggressive mistakes will be tolerated and defensive mistakes are not good. And I was on a call with our all hands a couple weeks ago, and I said, look, the reality is of any company, not just a startup, we're not all going to work together forever. This is all temporary. None of us are getting married. And what we care about is that when you go to do your next thing, that you've learned skills and a mindset and hopefully some tools that help you be able to do a bigger thing than you thought you could do before you worked here. Or maybe you thought you knew you could do something
Yep.
big, but it helps you do that. And so I think that like that's the way I would think about that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of employees and business owners, the end goal is the cash grab anyway. Whether you're CEO or whether you're founder or whether you're employee, like normally we're kind of taught. I don't know where we learn it, but like go for money. And again, money's not the highest purpose. Like, what do you live for? Who are you serving? That's a higher thing. But I mean, entrepreneurship, a lot of it is the cash grab.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
I,
Keep going.
I, I saw some statistics somewhere, and I was looking at the average earnings of an entrepreneur, right, or self-employed, not self-employed, but anybody who started a business, and then the average salary. And what I thought was interesting when I saw the numbers, they were about the same. I don't know, it was like 80 grand or 90 grand or something. Like the average business owner makes like 80 grand, 90 grand, and the average employee makes like 80, 90. And if you're kind of going to be average, I'm telling you, it's much better to be an employee because you don't have the risk and the headache and like the chance of failing if you're not going to go all in entrepreneurship. I think is really horrible, and you shouldn't do it. You really should take a job, and not because you have automatic security in a job, but if you're gonna not where it gets outsized gains is where you do something massive, right? If you did find the massive company, sold it for 9 figures, you're not gonna get that as an employee, no matter where you are. Even if you're a CEO of a place, you're not gonna get like $100 million in cash. But if you're playing in that average area, I think the employee is gonna have a better life. I don't know, maybe.
I totally agree. Investing's the same thing. So I think the actual statistic is that if you take people that just put their money in the S&P 500 over the last whatever 60 or 80 years, and then you take everyone, any sort of investor, only 7% of people beat the S&P 500. And so
Wow.
if you're gonna be a person that puts your money in anything else other than the S&P 500, you better be like Ray Dalio intelligent, but it's the same thing. Like it's way more stressful to watch your portfolio to watch these bets that you're taking go all over the place. It's similar. Like it definitely is less pressure being part of someone else's thing, I think, than it is when everyone's depending on you. I would think. Of course, the
Yeah.
CEO of Weight Watchers is somewhere in there too, and I don't know who they are. Like I'm sure they're an amazing person if they're
Also respect
listening.
that person a lot.
Yeah, yeah, like good for you.